supernatural is something that isn't supposed to happen, but it does happen.
AM 1420, WBSM presents Spooky South Coast with your hosts, Tim Weisberg and Matt Costa.
And welcome to Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with the silent assassin Matt Costa and science advisor Matt Moniz. Andrew Lake is also here in the studio. Andy, we do have an open mic over here. If you are interested in joining in the program, we'd love to have you.
I just won $4.
You won $4 on a Vermont scratch ticket?
I'm going to travel away to Vermont to get it.
Well worth it. Well worth it. You never know when you're going to be in Vermont chasing one of your many paranormal adventures.
Champ. It is a Champ lottery card.
Yes, our thanks to Matt Costa for picking those up for us when he was driving all over the world recently. Did you actually see Champ, the Lake Champlain monster, at all while you were out and about?
I did not. I actually...
Is that why you went there, to try to look for Champ?
I wanted to go, but it was like a little farther than where I was that I wanted to go. So it was another hour and a half out of the way. So
yeah,
I didn't go. But I do want to go because I hear they have a fine museum and everything up there.
Well,
and
if you ever do get up
and
there.
I do want to, I'll scuba dive down there and see what's in the murky waters of Lake Champlain.
I'll go with you.
Yeah, let's go.
If you do go.
Do you have a spear gun?
I have access to one, yeah.
Yes, excellent.
If you do go, bring one of those waterproof cages with your tape recorder in it. And if you happen to come across Champ, then I expect an interview for the show.
All right, will do.
I saw the Ocean State Paracon video. That came out great, that you put up on SpookySouthCoast.com.
Did it eventually go up on Spook?
Yeah, you actually had it set for private.
Yes.
But I fixed it.
Thank you.
So, but if you could do something similar with the Lake Champlain monster,
oh yeah, definitely,
that'd be much appreciated.
I'll have to get him on camera though.
Right, exactly. I think he'd be game for it.
Yeah.
Well, we are here to talk about the paranormal, as we are each and every Saturday night. There was some issues going on here at the station a little bit earlier, so we won't have Spooky TV for you, but we will have the WBSM stream going. If you're listening and you want to join in the chat room on Spooky TV at SpookySouthCoast.com, you can do so. Basically, I think what happened was there was a microburst here this morning. I was driving here at about 5 o'clock this morning from my morning show, and it was lightning like I'd never seen before. It was like just constant flashing. Like it didn't stop. And then torrential downpour, and ML Barron from the West Island Weather Station actually called in to the morning show and said that he thought that it could be a microburst, and he was awaiting confirmation from the National Weather Service on that. So I'm just going to assume that he got it because it was bad. And that was just, I mean, I was on 195, so I can only imagine how much worse it was, down Sconticut Neck and down West Island, because the storm itself actually happened offshore, the worst of it. So if that was just what we got here on land, it could have been far worse. So there was some things going on here, so the engineer's on his way down to fix that. Hopefully he doesn't have to have us get off the air to do so, but we're more than happy to do that, because our guest, Geoff Holder, who is going to be joining us, I don't see him online yet. He's supposed to be joining us via Skype, so I'm hoping that he will jump on and join us. That's the problem with trying to get somebody overseas, is that it's like the middle of the night for him, I think. I don't know. You guys are smarter than me, Andy and Matt. You do the math.
5-hour difference.
Yeah, between here and France?
Yeah.
So right now it's like 3 o'clock in the morning for him?
Yeah.
So, hopefully he didn't fall asleep waiting for us, and he'll be joining us to talk about his new book, Poltergeist Over Scotland. And if you've ever read any of Geoff's works before, he has a long list of works that he's done, including the Guide to Mysterious Insert Region of Scotland and England here. Also other books such as Paranormal Perthshire, Paranormal Glasgow, The Little Book of Glasgow, Haunted Dundee, Haunted St. Andrews. And we had him on in the past to talk about his book, The Jacobites and the Supernatural. So And we also talked with him about Scottish body snatching, grave robbers. I mean, if it's strange and unusual and it happens across the pond, Geoff knows all about it, especially in Scotland. So hopefully he'll be able to get in touch with us tonight and we can have that discussion on the air about poltergeist. But if not, we'll book him back on again for another time because we've had a pretty busy couple of weeks here the last few weeks.
Very busy.
We had our Legend Trips event at Fort Tabor last week, and that went very well. Our thanks to everybody who came out and bought a ticket and helped support the fort. We actually raised more money for Fort Tabor with this event than we did in the past. And we're going to announce tonight, publicly at least, where our next event is. We've given some hints about it online, but we'll be at the USS Salem in Quincy on August 31st. That's going to be our next Legend Trips event. It'll be up there and on sale for tickets in the next couple of days, but already, just in the pre-sale alone, we've sold a good amount of the tickets. We probably sold more than a quarter of the tickets that we have available already.
That quickly?
Yes. People want to get on the Salem. They're excited to get on there under the Legend Trips format, so should be exciting. I know that, Moniz, you've had a chance to be there before.
Oh, I've been on it several times.
Andy, how about yourself?
Yeah, it's in my book, Ghost Hunting Southern New England. Matter of fact, Matt was with me. Sarah Coombs came along, and we got a tour by one of the docents, and it's an amazing place with some great stories.
And what type of phenomena did you hear about going there? Because I've seen the Ghost Hunters episode where they talk about the EVPs they've captured in the birthing room of women apparently screaming "Get it out" or "Get out," and there's been reports of the older gentleman who was a tour guide who's seen wandering around,
and the anchor
Folksville,
yeah.
So what kind of things did you write about in the book?
Well, one of the stories I wrote about, one of the head docents was conducting a ghost hunt with a group that had paid to be on the ship. It was a little private group, and he was up in the captain's officer's mess, I should say, and they had a psychic hang out with him, and she said, "There's something in the room with us, and I don't like it." And a chair went sliding across the officer's mess. And moments after that, they clearly heard a woman scream in the passageway outside. And the funny story was, he said the co-founder of the ghost hunting group that was there, the wife, suddenly got in touch with her husband on the walkie-talkie and said, "Let's go home. I've had enough of the Salem." So this guy was telling Matt and I that the place at times can be very, very active. Seems to be ghosts of the tragedy with the Greece rescue after the earthquake in the 50s. Because not too many military men died. And when the ship was in mothballs, a guy fell down the elevator shaft.
Yeah, the elevator shaft where they have the helicopter that used to be on the back end of it.
But a lot of civilian deaths. A lot of civilian deaths after that earthquake.
So it seems like it's a place that is rife with paranormal activity and that we're going to have a lot to investigate on August 31st. So if you want to join us, legendtrips.com is the website. Remember, a portion of all ticket sales goes toward maintaining these historic properties that we go to, and to date we've raised over $10,000 for so many of these historic haunts.
That's incredible.
And really, I mean, when you look at some of these events that take place from other companies, and I don't want to bash what other people are doing in terms of their event strategies, but they bring in a lot of celebrities, we'll call them. They bring in a lot of outside guests. And with us, it's all about the location.
You're saying that their tours are more top-heavy?
I'm just going to say that when you bring in that element, it's great to be able to meet Jason and Grant and to investigate alongside Jason and Grant. But when you have them at an event, everybody's so amped up to have these celebrities there with them that it kind of takes away from the investigation. So it's like I got to hang out with Jason and Grant at this cool place, and you're walking away with memories more about that than you are about the location itself. And with Legend Trips events, of course, we make the event the star, or we make the location the star. So we're giving you the best opportunity that we can for you to get in there and investigate parts of the location that you might not ever get to. So,
well, I have to say, most people have not been disappointed. These places do, provide activity.
And what makes me happy is when you can have an event where, sometimes the activity doesn't want to play along. You guys know that. You've been in this field for a long time. You can't always guarantee that you're going to have something happen. But even if we have a night like that where it's slow on the activity end, and then we put the next event up on sale and I see 5, 6 3, 4, people ordering multiple tickets, people who might have come as a couple before now bringing their friends for the next one.
Yeah.
And it makes you feel good because it means that they felt like they had the best opportunity possible to investigate that location, even if they didn't get any activity taking place. So hopefully a lot of people will take advantage of this USS Salem event because they do a lot of ghost hunts on that ship. There are a lot of opportunities to get on there, but I can tell you that none of them are like the Legend Trips way.
No, not at all.
How many percentage would you say are return or repeat customers?
I would say that we have like better than 80% return rate.
That's phenomenal.
Right, and for anything in the tourism industry, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Because normally people will go once and they'll spend the money and they'll say, okay, I've had that experience. But with these events, it just seems like people want to keep having those experiences. So I believe our guest, Geoff Holder, is on the line. Let's see if we can bring him up here. We'll do this old-fashioned straight dial way. Hello, Geoff.
Testing.
Hey, we can hear you loud and clear. How's it going?
Tim, can you hear me? It's Geoff Holder here.
Yes, can you hear us? Hold on here. Let me do this. Geoff, can you hear me now?
I can indeed, Tim. Good evening. How are you doing?
Good. We've got you on the air. Thank you for joining us.
No problem at all.
And we're very
always a pleasure to be here.
We're very excited to talk to you. Of course, you had to get up in the middle of the night to do so. Thank you for that.
That's okay. No problem.
So I have the new book here, Poltergeist Over Scotland, and I want to get more in depth. We've talked about poltergeist a little bit with you in the past, but I really want to get into this topic because I think it's one of the most misunderstood aspects of the paranormal world.
Yes, I would quite agree, yes.
So when you decided to start putting this book together, you reference, of course, Harry Price and his work with Poltergeist Over England. Was that kind of the inspiration for you to put this work together?
It was definitely the inspiration for the name. Poltergeist Over England is such a classic work. It's the book that popularised the word poltergeist certainly in Britain, and it's a great title. And no one had ever written a history of Scottish poltergeists before, and so I thought it was time to do so.
I mean, 500 years of history is there's got to be a lot of poltergeist cases to go over.
Yes, that's right. I found 134 cases from the 17th century through to 2012. So I arranged them chronologically because it seemed to me that poltergeist behaviour, although it's consistent throughout the centuries, does tend to develop in relation to the way human society and technology develops. And so we can learn something by looking at the sort of the chronological sweep. So even though a 17th century poltergeist behaves very similarly to a 21st century poltergeist, there are some things that are different. For example, for the obvious things, that poltergeists learn to manipulate electricity, they learn to manipulate telephones, then mobile phones, so you can see those developments. And also there are changes in Scottish society that seem to be reflected in poltergeist behaviour as well. So I thought that was a worthwhile pursuit.
Well, I mean, we should probably start out for people that might not be familiar, but a poltergeist is significantly different than a ghost.
It seems to be. Poltergeist activities tend to be focused on physical phenomena, and whereas ghosts and hauntings tend to have perhaps what you might call visual phenomena, sort of phantoms, as well as things such as temperature changes. With poltergeist, the phenomena is less on things that are visual and more on things on the physical manipulation of the world. So this will include noises, bangs, raps, sometimes voices, sometimes communications. They seem to be able to manipulate water, sometimes fire, smoke. They pollute food. They throw things. They assault people. They like throwing stones. And on farms, in Scottish farms, they like to throw clods of peat. They sometimes attack animals. Sometimes scratch humans. They can range between what you might call mischievous and outright malign. Sometimes almost murderous. And so it seems to me that they are distinct from ghosts. On the other hand, there is a significant overlap. There's a sort of spectrum, if you like. And in about a quarter of poltergeist cases that I looked at, there was some kind of apparition involved, although the apparition wasn't the main focus. And a small number of classic hauntings have a degree or a small element of poltergeist activity. So it seems to me that there's a spectrum between the classic haunting and the outright poltergeist, and somewhere in the middle they meet. But if you look at a typical poltergeist case, it's about bang, crash, wallop, and if you look at a typical ghost case, it's about apparitions.
And with the poltergeist case, you mentioned the technology, and is it that it's easier to get people's attention by the use of technology, or for some reason these poltergeists are drawn to whatever might be the technology of the day?
I think it's the latter. Mm-hmm. Whatever degree of technological attainment that the human society has achieved, the poltergeists seem to be able to adapt to that. Obviously, in sort of pre-modern technology times, what you find is a concentration on farm implements. For instance, most poltergeists turn up in farms because most people lived in the countryside, and so the communication works then. But then you find this interesting thing that when ministers of the church turn up, say in the 17th century, for example, the poltergeist will start quoting Latin at them. Now, poltergeists these days tend not to speak Latin because, generally it's, that's why it's a dead language.
No pun intended.
Yes, indeed. But it was very much of the period. And then when sort of telephones became commonplace, only when telephones became commonplace, when people started to have telephones in their home, do poltergeists start to manipulate telephones. Electricity comes a bit earlier, but prior to that, some poltergeists can manipulate fire or smoke. And when it comes to water, some poltergeists seem to be able to throw water around or drip from the ceiling. But then when you get to the sort of middle of the 20th century and people start to have indoor plumbing, poltergeists know how to flush a toilet or, turn a tap on. And then there was a case just a few years ago in Britain where the poltergeist was communicating via mobile phones where the battery had been turned off. So the mobile phone was off, the battery was out, and they were still using their phone to communicate. So they do seem to be pretty adaptable as a species, if whatever they are. Yeah.
So if it took them a couple of 100 years to learn how to flush a toilet, then maybe my wife should cut me some slack because I'm only 35. I try to remember.
We all have relative evolution in these skills.
So as they are finding these new ways to utilize this technology to manifest, how do you draw the line then between whether or not it's actual poltergeist phenomena or just faulty mechanisms or faulty electricity coming into the house? I mean, it must be becoming, as easy as it is for them to manipulate this technology, it must also be easier to debunk the idea that they are poltergeists.
Yes, I think the two things work in parallel. There have been a number of what you might call large-scale surveys. I looked at 134 cases. Other investigators in both America and Britain have sort of looked at large quantities over time, and you find that somewhere between 5 and 15% of cases seem to have a degree of fraud or hoax about them. That seems to be pretty consistent across the data. So you always have to suspect that there's deliberate manipulation by sneaky humans at present. That and I think, as I said, somewhere between 5 and 15% of cases seem to allow for that. And there's also, of course, the problem of misperception, I should say, which is to say that some people can interpret faulty wiring as a poltergeist, and the more technology we have in our homes and our workplaces, the more it is possible that things will go wrong. And if you happen to be of the frame of mind that looks towards what I call the supernatural default, which is to say, instead of looking for a mundane explanation, you look for the paranormal one first, then perhaps you might misattribute something that goes wrong with your home technology as some kind of sort of poltergeist activity. But on the other hand, I think it's pretty difficult to misinterpret heavy rocks flying through the air and then sort of stopping in midair in the complete contravention of the laws of physics. I think it's difficult to misinterpret sort of household utensils being turned into sort of Baroque sculptures and then sort of attacking people at will. So I think there is always the room that you might be looking at some either misperception or hoax, but I suspect in a large number of cases you're not.
Well, and also when you're looking into the way that they can manipulate the technology, I mean, we've got more, I guess you could say, more energy coming into our houses these days than we did back then because, instead of just having the regular electrical appliances that we might have had 50 years ago, now we've got the cell phones and we've got computers. We've got all these different ways for them to not only manifest but also to draw the energy that they need to do so.
If that's what they're doing. I've written 2 books on poltergeists, and I have absolutely no idea what they are, or how they operate, or what the mechanism is that provides them with the sometimes extraordinary amounts of energy that would be required in the normal physical universe to achieve the effects that they do. Are they drawing their energy from the electricity supply and such like? Well, possibly, but on the other hand, they didn't need it in the 17th century, so I don't know. I remain absolutely ignorant of what it is that drives poltergeists.
But it's still one of the most debated aspects of poltergeist activity and phenomena is where it is coming from. I mean, there's debates about whether or not poltergeists are caused by dead people, or whether or not they're a phenomena unto themselves, some sort of entity unto themselves, or if it's not some sort of human influence over what's happening as well.
That's right. I wrote another book called What is a Poltergeist? And I looked at 9 different sort of theories, maybe too strong a word, 9 different notions that were put forward by people over the centuries about what is a poltergeist. As you say, probably one of the most common ideas is that there's some kind of discarnate entity. And for that, I suppose you could enumerate demons, ghosts. Also, and if you go back sort of 17th, 18th century, you find that fairies regarded as poltergeist agents. Fairies, and I don't mean Tinkerbell here. I mean sort of the fairies of history, who are not cute little winged, charming creatures, but absolutely deadly, malign creatures.
Right. When they start dying, nobody claps.
Yeah, that's I quite agree. And then quite a lot of cases used to be attributed to witchcraft. That sort of trope has kind of declined a little recently, but you still find examples in the 20th century of, up into the 1970s, in rural areas, of people ascribing the poltergeist activity to the form of a human witch, not necessarily of a demon, but of a human witch. There's the idea that it is the power of the human mind, probably unconsciously directed. That's the psychokinesis idea that our inner distress is somehow exteriorized in the poltergeists. There's the idea that poltergeists are thought forms. That's to say that through accident or deliberation, the human mind can somehow create a being or entity perhaps, with some form of. I'm getting lots of noise here.
Yeah, it looks like something just happened with the settings here. Let me just make an adjustment.
Okay.
How's that? Any better?
That is much better. Thank you. I shall continue as if I was never interrupted. These things are sort of tulpas that the human mind can somehow create, and they have a semi-independent existence. There's the idea that poltergeists are entirely natural, that there's something to do with the forces of nature, electromagnetism, geomagnetism, underground water sources, the earthquakes, earth tremors. All these ideas have been explored as well. My absolute favourite idea, the one I came across in a book written in the middle of the 19th century by two very Victorian British chaps who'd spent some time living in eastern Bulgaria, which at the time was under the control of the Turks. And they spent a lot of time living with the people and learning what they believed in. In their local village, there was a widespread belief in vampires. But these weren't Count Dracula vampires. These were vampires who, for the first 9 days of their existence, existed as invisible spirits that could only be seen as sparks in the night, and which behaved exactly like poltergeists. It's quite extraordinary to find a sort of vampire belief coinciding with poltergeists in Eastern Europe in the middle of the 19th century, and I found another examples of that, all of which shows that people have been afflicted by poltergeists over the centuries, and the way they try to interpret them within their own sort of cultural context. For early Christians onwards, poltergeists have been demons. In the 17th, 18th century, when witchcraft was not just illegal in Britain and colonial America, but also a capital crime, many people ascribe poltergeists to witches. And in our modern times, we think they are earth energies or the powers of the mind. And the powers of the mind idea has only been around since the 1930s. It's really sort of post-Freudian idea. So maybe within the next decade, someone will come up with a completely different theory about what powers poltergeists.
Now, some of the early phenomena associated with poltergeists was the throwing of stones and things of that nature. And when you're researching these stories, I'm sure that there's probably some degree of fantastical to the early stories, but when you put them in the context of modern poltergeists, they must start to make a lot of sense. I mean, these are probably stories that were dismissed by a lot of their contemporaries, but when you look back now at 500 years of history of similar type activity, you can't really turn a blind eye to it. You have to say, all right, there was something going on then.
That's right. It's sometimes difficult to extract from the historical records exactly what was going on at the time, because sometimes the record's incredibly incomplete, and at other times they are very partial. That is to say, they're written by someone with a particular religious point of view. But some of the best attested cases were written down in journals as they were happening. And so we find, sort of, for example, there's one case from 17th century Scotland, which goes into pages and pages of what was happening over several months on a day-by-day basis, written by one of the witnesses. And at the end of it, it lists all the people who said that they did experience and witness these things, and it includes 6 ministers of the church, the local landowner, 5 gentlemen farmers, and one suspects that they wouldn't have put their name to a document like that if they thought it was false. So I think even though we have to be a bit skeptical about some of the historical documentation, and particularly when something has been written down long after the events that took place, I think in some cases we are probably looking at an authentic record, even if it is slightly blurred at the edges, still an authentic record of something that really did happen.
But do you look at it, and when people are questioning whether or not rocks could be thrown, for example, in the 1600s, but then you find out that these things are strong enough to move entire rooms full of furniture in the blink of an eye in the 21st century. So it shows that perhaps they were miscast at the time and not really appreciated for the strong entities that they truly are.
Well, I think some people generally did appreciate the strength that the poltergeists exhibited. They didn't know the word poltergeist. They didn't have a conception of the word poltergeist. They had to conceive it as a demon or a ghost or something like that. But when you have walls being cast down, large wooden staves flying through the air and beating people mercilessly, when you have big boughs of wood flowing through the air. At one point, I think a blacksmith's anvil was thrown through the air. I mean, I couldn't lift an anvil, and people did appreciate just how powerful these entities were, even if they conceived them differently, perhaps from the way that we do now.
Well, you getting a little feedback there. You still with us, Geoff?
I am indeed, yes.
Okay. So looking at the idea then that poltergeists are probably separate from ghosts, at least it seems to be that way in a lot of these cases, then how come poltergeist phenomena happen so often alongside other paranormal phenomena?
You asked me that question as if you think that I know. I have no idea. Honestly, I said I've done all this research, I've written all these books, and I still haven't got a clue what it is that distinguishes one case from being a sort of ghostly haunting, another one from that turns out to be poltergeist phenomena, other than we tend to assume that the sort of general sort of widespread assumption is the ghosts are the spirits of the dead, although I think that's probably a disputable argument, or perhaps for another day. But there's generally, I would say, certainly within the research establishment, as this thing from the popular mind, we don't think of poltergeists as spirits of the dead much these days, although obviously some people do. But why ask me? I ask a poltergeist, and maybe they'll be forthcoming. I should point out that where in the few cases poltergeists do develop a voice, firstly they seem to develop an ego, and that ego seems to lie all the time. So maybe you wouldn't get the most accurate information from a pulse, but you never know. It might be worth trying.
Oh, we would definitely be up for the challenge. And there has been, at least in the 20th century and beyond, there's been a lot of attempts to tie in poltergeist phenomena with things such as RSPK, and it seems like we want to try to find a quantifiable reason why this takes place, and we want to give it a human cause. And in some cases, though, that does prove to be true. I mean, I've read plenty of cases. In the Tina case, for example, is very famous, where they determined that it was actually her that was causing a lot of this activity. And is it more of a modern phenomena to be able to find a human agent as the cause of the poltergeist phenomena?
Yes and no. The Tina case that you mentioned, as you say, is a very famous example of something where the theory fits the facts. The theory, RSPK, recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis, put forward as a possible explanation for the phenomena, and it fits with this disturbed individual at the heart of it. The classic of this is from 1960, once again, the case in Scotland, in Sochi in Scotland, where we have a very, very unhappy 11-year-old girl who's been removed from her family home. She's staying with relatives she's never met. She's in a different country. She's having to share a bed with her cousin. And worst of all, she's left a pet dog behind, who she really misses. And the poltergeist phenomena erupts in her home and in her school. It's witnessed by doctors. It's witnessed by her teacher. It's witnessed by also a large number of adults. And then it declines once her dog turns up and she gets a friend in school and she becomes happier. The witnesses were interviewed very quickly after the events, and some of the poltergeist knock-ins were recorded on tape. So they're still amenable to analysis. That's a classic example of RSPK. That fits. The theory fits the phenomena. That you don't need to call upon any kind of discarnate entity to explain that. And Then again, and once again, you find a case in the 17th century in Scotland where this was in a rural farmhouse. The father in the family suspected that one of his children might have been the sort of focus of what was going on. So he sent each one of his children away to stay with friends or relatives and noticed if anything happened. And when I think the eldest son, I think, was 18 or 19, when he left, the phenomena ceased. And when he came back, it returned. So they were sort of thinking along the same lines sometimes as well. But that being said, trying to find a one-size-fits-all theory to accommodate all poltergeist activity seems to me to be a dead end. I don't think the ecology of poltergeists is that straightforward. Some of it does seem to fit exactly with RSPK, with the human mind exteriorizing itself. But in other examples, we can't find any focus at all. I think some of it is that, and some of it is not. Poltergeists are their entire ecosystem, and we're looking at different parts of it, and we're sort of just trying to glimpse our way through the murk.
It seems to me like it's almost too clean and too reassuring of a reason. Yes, that's right, and it's also that sometimes. What happened? One of the great poltergeist researchers, William Roll, the late William Roll, who is, if you haven't read his books, go out and read them. They're fantastic. He sort of analysed a lot of cases, and in the 70s he came up with this idea that the typical poltergeist focus was a female below the age of 23. With some kind of emotional or physical distress, and that analysis was useful, but that's now for some people being regarded as default. So when some poltergeist investigators turn up, they immediately look for the unhappy young female. Where that's the wrong way. That's the cart before the horse. What you need to do is look at the phenomena and see what's happening, as think from say, well, let's look for the unhappy little girl or the unhappy teenager. Because although that's the case in some cases, in the majority of poltergeist cases, there isn't an unhappy young female at the heart of it. So although it's useful as a way of perhaps conceptualizing some of the cases, it's not universal. Like you said, we want simplistic ideas. We want to be able to explain the way a poltergeist, because they're so challenging to the way we think about the world. They shift the paradigm of how we think the world is organized, how the universe runs, that we want some kind of straightforward explanation. Oh, it's an unhappy female teenager. That's not an explanation. That's maybe an observation. That's about as far as that can go. Well, and I know that I've investigated a few cases over the years, or at least been on the periphery of a few cases where it seems like that could be the case. But like you said, it's probably a matter of the case fitting the theory more than the theory being correct.
Yes, that's right. If you go into a paranormal investigation and you've got these preset ideas of what you're going to find, then lo and behold, you will find them. But what you may not find is the truth. If indeed the truth is actually amenable to investigation in a poltergeist research, because they're sneaky creatures, polts.
They are, but it also seems too like the phenomena can happen so quickly and so suddenly and with such strength that when people do bring it to the forefront and do call attention to it, sometimes by the time they start getting the attention to it, it's kind of gone away already. And that's probably where a lot of these fakeries come from, because something legitimate may have started off, but then there comes that pressure to continue the performance even after the poltergeists have gone away.
You've put your finger on it exactly there. The notion of performance, I think, is something very, very important. I think you can regard it like a very florid poltergeist case can be a kind of sort of theatrical terrorism, and it can be alarming for those at the start of it. But as you say, it takes a while before in inverted commas, the important people turn up before the doctors and the journalists and the psychical investigators and the scientists, before they turn up. And maybe by the time they do turn up, it's gone away. Now, for the person at the centre of it, maybe this is they're now at the source of attention. Maybe welcome, maybe unwelcome, but they may feel pressured to continue the performance, to actually fake the phenomena, and that's often done in a very gauche or clumsy manner, and it is often easily exposed, at which point people point the finger and say, aha, the whole thing is fraudulent. But it's something that I've really noticed, that you have high-level complex phenomena at the start, which are inexplicable, and by the time the researchers turn up, it's descended into farce, into outright fakery, because the polter simply stopped. That's what they do. They for no reason that we can discern, they just stop. And then, people at the centre of it may feel pressured, as you say, to perform for the circus that's arrived in town.
Maybe not only just for the attention aspect of it, but also because they don't want people to think that they were crazy, and that they want them to realize that this phenomenon did take place, and just for their own reputation and for their own sanity, they want people to believe.
Yes, I think that's part of it. Human beings have very complex motives, and if your life has been disrupted in this way, perhaps you might fear going through life with an unfortunate reputation as being a bit nutty, and maybe that's one of the sort of motives to sort of continue what I think we rightly call the performance.
So when you are researching these cases and putting them together, and not just for the new book Poltergeist Over Scotland, but when you're putting together the original book What is a Poltergeist, you're probably hearing a lot of stories that you have to determine that at some point might have gone into the farcical, and try to find the true heart, what we would call the heart of the haunting, kind of the heart of the poltergeist matter.
Yes, that's right, and I think that the heart is the original phenomena. That's what you need to look at first. The things that happen first before people turn up, and people turn up often have their own agendas. If you look at the number of cases around about the high point of spiritualism, so let's look at sort of the later 1860s, 1870s, and then again in the 1920s after the First World War. These are the high points of spiritualism, and spiritualists have a particular worldview, which is that we survive into the afterlife, and the dead are eager to communicate with the living. And spiritualists tended to interpret poltergeist cases as being communications from the dead. So if the spiritualists were first on the scene, they would shape the phenomena along those lines. And so everything that followed thereafter would be spiritualist shaped. Whereas if you have someone who's first on the scene who's deeply skeptical and is convinced that the whole thing is fraudulent, this would typically be someone like a medical doctor, perhaps a psychologist, although the historical terms now, I think medical doctors, or perhaps an officer of the law. They would often bully the young person at the heart of the case into admitting that they'd faked it. And so the later stuff is usually less valuable, although it's much more publicized than the much earlier phenomena. That's what you need to look at when you're trying to discern whether there's any verite to the phenomena being reported.
All right, we have about a minute before we have to take a news break, but coming up in the next hour, Geoff, I want to talk with you more about these cases particular to Scotland that you researched for the new book Poltergeist Over Scotland, but just let everybody know where they can get your books.
Yep, the books are available via that nice Mr. Amazon, and then all online places. What is a Poltergeist is an e-book only, and it's available on Kindle and Kobo and any sort of online retailer for e-books. And What is a Poltergeist can also be obtained via my website, which is geoffholder.com, or you can get it via any online retailer, Amazon.com or anywhere else in the world as well.
Excellent. And your website is linked up on the front page of SpookySouthCoast.com as well, so people can go there if they want to find out more about Geoff and about his works. As I said, we are coming up on a news break. When we come back on the other side, we'll talk more about Poltergeist with Geoff Holder, and we'll talk about the new book, Poltergeist Over Scotland, and some of these cases that he's researched over the years. We'll also have more discussion. We'll take your calls, 508-996-0500, 1-877-996-1420. You can email us spookycrew at SpookySouthCoast.com, and you can also grab us on Twitter at SpookySC. So plenty of ways to get involved in the discussion. We don't have Spooky TV running tonight. The cameras are not up and running. But you can log on to SpookySouthCoast.com and go to the Spooky TV page, and you'll see the chat room is up and running there. Everybody is in there chatting, having a good discussion and a good time talking about Poltergeist. And we can also take questions from there as well, because Matt Costa, without all the cameras to worry about, can kind of just read off any questions that pop up there. You're like the Stephanie Burke of tonight's show.
I am.
You are. You're nowhere near as pretty.
Yeah.
But you are the laptop maven tonight. So keep an eye on that. So we will take all your calls as well. And anything to do with Poltergeist, give us a call. 508-996-0500, 877-996-1420. Quick reminder for everybody, too, that if you want to get involved in that next Legend Trips event, just go to legendtrips.com and sign up for the mailing list, because it will be announced to the public coming up in the next couple of days. And we're already about a quarter of the way sold out, so you don't want to miss your opportunity to join us on the USS Salem on August 31st. We'll be right back with more here on Spooky South Coast.
Matt Costa.
Welcome back to Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with the silent assassin Matt Costa, science advisor Matt Moniz, and Andrew Lake is sitting in with us as well from Greenville Paranormal Research and from 30 Odd Minutes as well. Andy, how's things been going?
I'm doing pretty good.
I talked to you for about 2 minutes last week, non-event related at Fort Tabor, but
it's going pretty good. Listening to this topic tonight is pretty interesting because, as you know, I've been looking into a case now for 4 years in Scituate, Rhode Island, and just thinking about, he's talking about the gamut of poltergeist activity, throughout, technology and time, and the poltergeist activity at this house, it can go from anywhere from bending spoons to messing with the internet and television and phone hookup in the house so bad that they had to call in the local service, and 3 technicians could not find anything wrong with their computers, phones, and their diagnostic equipment couldn't understand what was going on. And the woman kept her mouth shut about the house being haunted, and then after about an hour and a half, she said, would you use the word paranormal to describe the problems that we're having in this house with our phone and internet hookup? And the guy says, yeah, why? What do you mean by that? She goes, because the house is haunted. We just wanted professionals to come in and confirm that this stuff is as wacky as we think it is. So they go from bending spoons to messing with TV remotes and changing the channels on the TV and everything else. It's the whole gamut.
So our guest tonight is Geoff Holder. He's the author of the new book, Poltergeist Over Scotland. And Geoff, what Andrew was just describing, I don't know how much of it you heard, but I'm sure that's what a lot of 2013 poltergeist reports sound like.
Indeed, so that's I would say quite a high-level poltergeist. Most poltergeist stories are far less dramatic than that. But the ones that draw attention, they do seem to be able to manipulate technology at will.
Yeah.
Is there, though, with the more modern phenomena, with the more modern technology, is there a chance that they could do damage to these things? Because, we've seen in movies, for example, we've seen them be able to blow out the electrical systems in entire houses. Is there a power surge associated with their presence that could damage our more modern, delicate technologies?
I'd be more concerned about damage to my more modern, delicate skin than I would be my computer system. There's a famous case from Rosenheim in Germany, for memory serves 1967, where the centerpiece was a legal office, and the focus was the teenage clerk, and the the legal office was having problems with its telephone and electrical system. The telephone bill was rocketing. It was like they were calling the moon or something. And the speaking clock was being dialed faster than the system itself could actually cope with, far faster than human fingers could. And they called in some technicians, and the technicians did actually record power surges taking place around the building that they could not explain. And whilst these surges were happening, they noticed things like, the lights would rock, the lights would come on and off around the young woman at the centre of it. She was very unhappy with the situation with her fiancé. That was the core of it. So we do have a few cases where the poltergeist activity has sort of shown up on meters in an inexplicable way. And what you were describing there sounds to be an absolute classic of its case. That being said, some modern polts don't seem to be concerned with technology at all. They just like throwing things around and, making nuisances of themselves in a classic manner. They're just capricious polts. You can't say a polt will do this because a polt will do exactly the opposite.
Right, it's almost like they do it to mock you, and they do it to give you what you're not expecting.
Yeah, in some cases the poll does seem to be reactive. It seems to be like a sort of, I don't know. I think there's something of a kind of. Not childlike, that's not the word, but something, an underdeveloped intelligence, I think, is perhaps at play, which takes gleeful pleasure in just being wrong, just being naughty. So no matter what people suspect is going to happen, it doesn't do it. Or it'll do it and then it'll do something completely different the next time. You can't expect consistency from polls. You can't expect logic. You can't seem to find any kind of meaningful communication. Maybe polls create chaos just because they can. Who knows?
Right. Maybe that's what they feed off of. Maybe it's not so much the chaos that they're causing, but maybe it's our reaction to it.
Indeed, one of the sort of ideas put forward by particularly Colin Wilson, who's sort of great writers on this subject, he has this idea that sometimes when we're very frustrated or angry or unhappy, we sort of create the sort of balls of energy around us, sort of some kind of psychic energy, for want of a better term. And that doesn't do anything until a pult comes on. A pult is some sort of low-level discarnate entity, a sort of delinquent of the spiritual world. And they find this energy and they feed off this energy. And by creating more chaos, it creates more unhappiness and more stress, and more of that sort of human energy pours into the psychical environment or whatever it is, and the pults become more active. And maybe after a while they just get bored. And that's why they stop. Once again, we have absolutely no idea what it is that they are and why they do it. So this is all idle speculation in a way, but it certainly is the case that pulse are just not consistent in any way at all.
But really, what else do we have but conjecture? Because they are some of the most head-scratching phenomena that takes place in terms of the paranormal. We can almost depend on some sort of repeatability or at least an intelligent influence over straight up ghostly phenomena. And with UFO phenomena, we can often find a lot of physical evidence that's left behind. But with poltergeist, it's like the microburst storm that we had here earlier today. It comes, it's powerful, it happens, it goes away, and it leaves very little trace except for the destruction.
Yeah, I think you've summed it up perfectly. If you are unfortunate to be at the end of a poltergeist infestation, I do think it is unfortunate, and I think it is truly. I think it's like experiencing crime. I think it's being like the victim of a serious crime. Then as you say, it comes, it goes, and it leaves a trail of destruction in its wake, and people then scratch their heads and try and work out what the heck it was. And as yet, despite hundreds and hundreds of years of people writing and thinking and trying to analyse poltergeists, we still haven't got a clue what they are.
Well, so the new book is called Poltergeist Over Scotland, and you have chronicled stories dating all the way back to the 1600s. What's the earliest story that you came across?
The earliest story dates from approximately 1635. And this was a time when Scotland was in one of its periodic let's kill everybody who doesn't believe exactly the same way that we believe sort of periods. It was a sort of period of religious and political civil war. And it occurred in Edinburgh, and it occurred in the house of a Protestant clergyman. And the Poles seemed to take exception to their prayers. They seemed to be very active during their prayers. They seemed to be very active during the Sabbath. It polluted food. It opened all the locked chests and drawers in the house and brought all the clothes out and threw them around the house. It banged. It crashed. It didn't develop a voice, but it just seemed to just do the sort of classic knocking, banging, let's create sort of chaos kind of thing. I've got a quote from here. Once they found their best linen taken out, the table covered with it, the napkins as if they had been used, yea, and liquor in their cups as if company had been there at meat. The rumbling was extraordinary. The good man commonly called his family to prayer when it was most troublesome, and immediately it was converted into a gentle knocking, like the modest knock of a finger. But then there was excessive knocking, as if a beam had been heaved by the strength of many against the floor. And in one case, a serving woman who was disturbed by it at night got so fed up with it, she threw half a cannonball at it, and the cannonball disappeared. And I estimated that at about 5 pounds of metal and stone just disappearing, which is just absolutely amazing. And I think what's good about this case is that we have a lot of witnesses. At least 6 witnesses are mentioned as sort of experiencing this.
So it seems like it has that typical kind of messing with people reputation even back then.
Oh, yes, that's right. Scotland comes very late to the poltergeist world. We find cases from continental Europe, for example, from as early as the 2nd century AD, wow. When poltergeists were then interpreted as demons, and they tended to assault holy men, holy Christian men. So those are sort of some of the earliest that we have. So the problem with Scotland is that the written records before the 1600s are quite sparse. And for a poltergeist case in history, you needed someone to write it down. And in a country where there was very low literacy, there would have obviously probably been poltergeist cases, but no one was writing them down. This is the first, and this case I only found out because only one particular set of letters from one individual to another survived. That's the only reason we know about this case. And so, although there are many others, this is the absolute earliest that I could find. But this is This isn't a poltergeist in development. This is the classic poltergeist case there already in 1635.
And you mentioned kind of the socioeconomic status of Scotland at the time, and it seems like as Scotland's had a pretty tumultuous history over the years, and it seems like as it went through these different periods of change, did the poltergeist activity ramp up, and were there more instances of cases taking place? No,
I can't find any comparison between the rate of poltergeist activity and social effects. Those two things seem to be independent. That being said, of course, in history, once again, you need someone to write it down. And the number of cases increases as you move, especially into the 19th century, simply because you have a larger literacy. Much wider literacy. And secondly, in the middle of the 19th century, you find organizations such as the Ghost Club and the Folklore Society and the Society for Psychical Research. They're being founded, and people are now taking an interest in the supernatural, whereas before it would be the quirk of the only person in the village who could read and write, who would be willing to record these for us. So there's no ratio between social disturbance and poltergeist activity that I can find. It's simply that the more literate people you have in the country, and the more people are interested in this, that's when you get more cases. So, for example, in the the 17th century, I think there were 9 cases recorded, and in the first half of, we've had more cases in the last 13 years of the 21st century than we had in the whole of the 17th century. So that's simply because there are more people reporting these things. So I think poltergeists seem to be independent of social chaos. Although they do respond to social chaos, he said, contradicting himself, particularly in the 17th century, poltergeists are interested in the religious and political rumblings of the time. They seem to be acting or responding or playing their part. So if there's a religious dispute, they'll take a role within that. If there's a military dispute, they'll take a side in that. But other than that, no, I don't see any correspondence.
Well, it is fascinating that you mentioned that they do want to kind of play their part, because it makes me think that there really is an intelligence behind whatever these creatures are, and that they know exactly what they're doing.
Well,
that's just what I'm sensing from them.
I sense a crude intelligence at play in some of the cases, and as I said earlier, the early Scottish poltergeists used to communicate in Latin. They don't do that anymore because nobody knows Latin, and so poltergeists seem to evolve with humans. The preoccupations of the humans become the preoccupations of the polts.
They seem to know the buttons to push.
Yes, indeed. So in some cases, physically the buttons to push. But no poltergeist in modern times engages in endless discussion about religious issues and quoting scripture. They don't do that anymore. Whereas 300 years ago, that's what they used to do, because our preoccupations have changed. So I think they kind of evolve in parallel to us, I think.
Well, there was a case. Mike?
No, you're on.
All right. There was a case in the United States here in the 19th century. I believe it was called the Bell Witch.
I was just reading about it today, believe it or not.
Yeah. So, and it was quite regularly quoting scripture and song and various other things, doing apportations and moving things about. And that's a well-documented case.
Even Andrew Jackson was friends of the family. He stayed in the house, and he was terrified by what he witnessed in the house. But again, very religious family. A lot of prayer when these things happened. Seemed to stir things up.
And do you find poltergeists in the contemporary world tend not to be as religiously obsessed as poltergeists from the past, because our society has changed?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right now we're in the religion of the iPad.
Yeah.
So that's what they're going to mess with.
Yes.
Well, we are talking with our guest, Geoff Holder. If you have any questions for Geoff about the world of poltergeists, 508-996-0500, 1-877-996-1420. I know, Matt Costa, you're looking at me like I have two heads, but no, we can actually patch calls through to Skype now. And so if anybody wants to call in and ask a question, feel free. And you mentioned that the reports get more numerous as the years go by and as people become more literate. And is there any change in the phenomena that they're reporting as the years go by? Is there any, say, more an increase in more overt actions by these poltergeists? Is it almost like they know that the story is being written about them, so they're trying to provide a little bit more?
I don't get a sense of that. The most recent case I come across in Scotland is from 2012, and it sounds. Take away the fact that it was in a modern council. I know. Actually, there is one thing, which is that these days most poltergeists take place in what's called council housing here. Council housing is public housing. It's built by the local authority. And large numbers of people in Scotland still live in council houses. So from the Second World War onwards, poltergeists move out of the farms and into the council houses because that's where the population moves. But other than that, this 2012 case, we've got shoes being thrown through the air, mobile phones being thrown, pots and pans scattered across the floor, doors are slamming, cupboard doors are banging incessantly, bedclothes pulled off the bed, voices, flickering lights, damage to photographs of family members, and then messages left in flour, scattered on the floor, and then a really weird thing where the 4-year-old child in the house acquires what may be an imaginary friend, but also is described as a sort of bald man with an injured eye who keeps making very malignant suggestions. And all of this, to be honest, could be in the 17th century. So, I don't think the Pult is sort of playing up to its publicity potential. It's just doing what Pults do, which is let's just mess with the world and with human minds, because that's what we do.
Well, we've mentioned the Tina Resch case and we've mentioned the Bell Witch case, which are both very famous American examples of poltergeist activity. What is probably the most famous Scottish case?
Well, I mentioned earlier the Sochi case from 1960, which was investigated very thoroughly at the time and seemed to be a very, very significant example of the fact that RSPK was definitely real. Probably the most famous case in Scotland in more recent times is something I'd just like to spend a little time on because it is so absolutely extraordinary. It took place in Glasgow, 1974 and 1975, and the context was that it was a council housing again, and it was a 2-story house. So one family was living on one floor, and one family was living one below. And the two families were at war with each other, been at war with each other for years, and then phenomena started happening, banging. Typically, banging started happening on the floors. And the people upstairs started complaining to people downstairs, stop your banging, and the people upstairs saying, no, you stop your banging as well. And the police got called, and police got called again, and people got arrested. And whilst they were in the police station being questioned, the banging continued, and then sort of all hell broke loose. Water being flooding the house, things flying through the air, things being set on fire, smoke. The 12-year-old and 14-year-old boy in the family started to become manipulated by some kind of possessive entity. Messages are sent from dead people telling the people upstairs to murder the man downstairs. Wow. They have local councillors, they have Catholic priests, they have Protestant ministers, they have the post office, they have the electricity company, they have the police, they have everybody involved. And in the end, it gets so bad that the 2 investigators from the Scottish Society for Psychical Research, one of whom was a professor of astronomy and the other of whom was a professor of theology, spent months in the house because it only seemed to be their presence that seemed to calm down the poltergeist. And it had some sort of ridiculous things. At one point, one of the investigators was so fed up with the constant noises, he just shouted out, "This is ridiculous, just stop it." And the poltergeist stopped immediately. So it was responsive in some ways, and it lasted for about a year, I think, before it just vanished for no obvious reason.
It attacks the brain, and you might not know what hit you.
It's a stroke, and it can cripple or kill you.
Not surprisingly, because the family involved didn't really want the light of publicity being shone on what was a misery for them. They all lost weight, they weren't sleeping, the kids were taken away from school, all sorts of terrible things happened to them. But what strikes me about it, this Glasgow case, it's almost as if it was an apprenticeship. You may have heard of the Enfield poltergeist. Do you know that? Yeah, the Enfield poltergeist is probably the most famous British poltergeist of recent times. It took place in 1977 in London. And the reason it's famous is because it was recorded at the time. So we have journalists and we have television people turning up, and we have recordings, and we have multiple witnesses, and it was publicised at the time. But if you look at the phenomena from the Enfield poltergeist from 1977 and compare it to the Glasgow poltergeist from 74 to 75, it's as if the Glasgow case was the apprenticeship, and then it moved to London to continue its sort of more mature activities. They seem to be in greatly in parallel, but the Glasgow case is far less well known, simply because they didn't want publicity at the time. And sadly now, with the exception of the family, who are still anonymous, all the witnesses, all the researchers are now dead. So and there weren't any decent recording taken of these extraordinary events, and which is a great shame, because now we're going to lose what may be one of the most significant cases of the 20th century, because we simply don't have enough recordings. Whereas Enfield continues to sort of fascinate us simply because we have recordings of people who saw it at the time and so on. So I think that one is truly absolutely amazing. The more you read about it, it just seems mind-boggling what was going on, and terrifying for the individuals involved.
Yeah, and of course, with the Enfield case, we have that picture of a girl jumping off of her bed. And I've always been very skeptical of the photographic proof from that case. But
yes, but we do have audio recordings
right.
of some of the things happening in the Enfield house. And many of the people involved were interviewed at the time. Whereas with the Glasgow case, we sadly don't have any recordings at all. The Glasgow case was also matter through matter. Things would fly through walls. They would. This was seen by people, and that's impossible. It's physically impossible. But that's what people were saying. The boys developed incredible physical strength. One of them, who was 11 years old, a very slight child, he overcame his uncle, who was 6'2", 16 stone, former Dutch resistance fighter. It was the furniture got moved, fire, smoke, dolls would spin around like they were cartoon characters. Figures appeared made out of polystyrene wig heads, and it just seemed to sort of just go on and on and on, and then it stopped. Which is what polts do. They just stop.
And when you talked about young boys having extraordinary feats of strength like that, is that something that comes from within them through the poltergeist, or is that like the poltergeist kind of just moves the adult back? I mean, is it something that the boys reported feeling any differently when it took place?
No, they said that it wasn't them that was doing it.
Okay.
That they were being made to do it. But once again, you're asking me as if I know about the motivations and mechanisms of poltergeists. Yeah, that is out with my abilities and knowledge, I'm afraid.
Well, if anybody has any questions for our guest, Geoff Holder, 508-996-0500, 1-877-996-1420. We do have a question from the chat room on Spooky TV at SpookySouthcoast.com. Destin Nathan Truth wants to know, what is the difference between poltergeist and demons? And I think he means in terms of the level of activity, perhaps.
Well, once again, your correspondent is asking me a question as if I know about this, because this is all putative. The word demon is an interpretive word. It's a word that people place on the phenomena because it fits within their worldview. I mean, most cultures do have demons within their belief system, at least at some point in their development. Christian demons are evil. They do evil things. Poltergeists sometimes do evil things, but sometimes they're just annoying nuisances. I mean, the cases that we've been talking about today are the most florid cases, the most extreme cases. Most poltergeist cases are relatively mild. A few things get knocked over, there are a few noises, it lasts for a day or two, and then that's it. But obviously they're less dramatic, they're less interesting, so we don't talk about those things. Some people think poltergeists are demons. if we look at the indication that a demon is a discarnate, non-human entity, and then there's seems to be some plausibility that maybe some cults are discarnate, non-human entities. Does that mean they're demons in the sort of traditional religious sense? You know what? I have no idea. But for some people, demons, the demonic appellation fits. And I'll give you a very good example. This is actually an example from France in the 19th century, where a very respected, very highly intellectual local village priest was persecuted by a poltergeist for something like 25 years. It was like his personal poltergeist, and he regarded it as a demon. It was him against the demon, and it was like his personal demon. But he was a deeply Catholic man in a deeply Catholic tradition. The way of interpreting the poltergeist, the only interpretation that he could have was a demon. He couldn't think of it as PK or anything like that. It had to be a demon. So for him and everyone who's followed his ideas, the pult is a demon. The demon acts as a pult. It's almost like a circular argument. If you don't have sort of those religious views, the idea that cults are demons might seem ridiculous. Does the Lord of Hell get his rocks off by knocking over coffee cups and shouting boo at people out of dark corners? Possibly not. Once again, I have absolutely no idea. What's the difference between cults and demons? Your guess is as good as mine.
Well, but there does seem to be a lot of corollary between some of the poltergeist activity and what might happen in the early stages of a demonic case, where perhaps it could be just, the beginning stages of that stage where they just want to get your attention and they want to see how far they can push it. And maybe with these poltergeist cases, they realize they can't go any further. They can't get it into the stages of obsession and oppression and eventually possession, so they move on to another subject. There is some corollary between them, but also at the same time, like you said, we really can't be sure.
Absolutely. You can't be sure with anything with poltergeists.
Well, I guess that's good for you, because that means you'll be able to keep writing different books about them as we struggle to solve the question.
The pleasures to come, definitely. Polts, they challenged, as I've said before, they challenged the paradigm, the way we think about the world. That's why they're endlessly fascinating. At one level, we are drawn to them because they are so extreme. But on the other hand, that's a sort of conceptual level. If they do things which we regard by the laws of physics as being impossible, and then people consistently witness the same things again and again, it gives us perhaps a hint that maybe there is something in the physical universe that we could investigate further to sort of learn more about the universe. And that might sort of shift the paradigm about the way we think, the way the universe is organized. And that, I think, is the greatest fascination, the greatest potential. If a whole bunch of really high-powered, open-minded scientists sort of started investigating pulse, maybe we would learn a bit more about the physical universe.
Well, that's something we can certainly discuss after we take a break. If anybody has any questions for our guest, Geoff Holder, feel free to call in 508-996-0500, 1-877-996-1420. We'll be right back with more here on Spooky South Coast.
Hello.
Hey, man. You up?
No.
Wake up. I need to talk to you. I think your house is haunted.
Hey, come on, it's 2:30 in the morning.
I can't sleep in here, man. I'm scared.
And by the way, our guest tonight, Geoff Holder, could hear everything you were saying about him during the commercial break. Right, Geoff?
Absolutely, and I'll be taking notes and informing my lawyers later.
It's so awesome, though, when we can connect with people so far away, such as yourself, Geoff. And thank you again for staying up late or getting up early, however you swung it to join us here on the program live.
No problem. My pleasure, as always.
And if anybody has any questions about poltergeist, the phone lines are open, 508-996-0500, 1-877-996-1420. And I think a lot of people's opinions about poltergeist activity are, of course, affected by Hollywood and we see a film like, for example, Poltergeist, and people start to think that is the commonplace phenomena for a lot of these cases, but that's not necessarily the way that it goes. It's not always, boogeymen and clowns that are choking kids under the bed and killer trees, but it is still pretty strong.
Actually, I would contradict you. I think every case that I've in the world is probably in a house built on an Indian burial ground. That's obviously the explanation.
Well, where we are in New England, that actually is not out of the realms of possibility.
For you guys, maybe, but
it makes me wish that I had a little drop here I could play on the computer of Craig T. Nelson. You moved the headstones, but you left the bodies, didn't you? But one case that is particularly fascinating is this Egyptian case, Geoff.
Yeah, this is one of my favourite cases from Scotland because it's got everything. It's got rich, posh people. It's got poltergeists, and it's got ancient Egypt. I mean, you can't go wrong. It's journalist heaven, isn't it? This is in the mid-1930s, and this is a time when, following the sort of the discoveries about Tutankhamun and such like, rich people would tour the sites of Egypt as sort of a fashionable thing to do, and we have two people from Edinburgh. Sir Alexander Seton and his wife, and they bribed their way into a recently excavated tomb near the pyramids. And his wife, his name's Zayla, she steals one of the bones from the skeleton that's exposed in the tomb and brings it back to their home in Edinburgh. Grave robbing, charming. But and then about 4 months after they return, poltergeist activity breaks out in the house where they live in the centre of Edinburgh. It's the usual things. Furniture is tipped over. There are noises heard from locked rooms. Glass ornaments shatter. Fires break out. Smoke, water, crashings, bangings. All these things. Destruction to furniture. Sort of the classic thing. And what happens is that Sir Alexander, who's undergoing a very difficult time in his life. He and his wife are almost splitting up. He goes to his gentleman's club, gets a bit squiffy, blurts out the story, and lo and behold, it turns up in the local press the next day. And as such, it then becomes a sort of a fascination for the Scottish press for several months. And rather than hide away, Sir Alexander plays to the gallery. He starts giving lectures to the College of Psychic Science and giving interviews to journalists and all that sort of thing. And the idea develops that the bone is cursed, and journalists start talking about the curse of the pharaoh, the curse of the mummy. It's all sort of, I mean, there was no pharaoh involved, there was no mummy involved, but never mind the truth. When it comes to ancient Egypt, everyone loves a good fictitious story. And individuals started offering to take the cursed bone back to Egypt as long as they would be paid a vast fortune, sort of risk money as well. And this just sort of went on and on and on for several months. Once again, played through the press, who loved the whole idea of rich people, ancient Egypt, a curse, all that sort of thing. And at the same time, the Satan's marriage was absolutely falling apart all the way through this. And the story was put out in the press was that finally the bone was destroyed by itself when it shattered the cabinet in which it was kept, and it itself was pounded into dust, and thereafter the curse was lifted. That's not apparently what happened. What really happened is that Sir Alexander wanted to destroy the bone from the very start, but his wife, who had actually nicked the bone in the first place, wasn't having anything of it. So he waited until his wife was out of the house, and then he got his uncle, who was a Jesuit priest, to perform a blessing over the bone, and then he pounded it into dust and got rid of it that way. So that's what really happened. And ever since, people have been trying to work out what it was that was causing it. Everyone said, of course, the poltergeist was the ancient Egyptian person whose bone they had purloined in the tomb. Woo! It's a big woo, this sort of event. But, the events didn't take place until 4 months after the bone was installed in their Edinburgh home. Seems to be a bit late to me. One writer in the 1980s was convinced that the whole thing was a hoax perpetuated by Sir Alexander's wife as a way of trying to push him towards the divorce that both of them wanted, which seems plausible. But my suspicion is that the poltergeist may have been a sort of RSPK from Sir Alexander himself, because it was a man under great stress, and they got divorced soon afterwards, and perhaps that's what was happening there. And what I did, I looked at the descriptions of their trip to Egypt at the time, and I sifted through all the excavation reports in Egypt in the mid-1930s, and I identified the tomb that they went into. And so if I ever get to go to the pyramids, then I'm going to go and visit that tomb, because that's the place where the poltergeist bone of the cursed Egyptian mummy pharaoh nonsense ended up in Edinburgh. But even so, I still have no idea what was going on.
Well, you did mention how the press loved that story, and for a variety of factors. And that's one question I wanted to ask you, at least there, because I know how things are here in the United States with the media attention that is paid to paranormal stories. But as we get, as we're part of the big World Wide Web now, we can pick up more and more stories from over there in our Google News feeds and whatnot. And I wanted to ask you how the media treats some of these more recent cases of the late 20th century and early 21st century as compared to how they might have in the past.
One word. Woo!
Still, yeah.
Woo! It's all woo. That it doesn't get any more intellectual than that, I'm afraid.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems like there's more of a willingness to report them, but there's also more of the sensationalist side to them, as opposed to over here, where at least we're starting to take them a little bit more seriously. Although I can still picture all the TV news reporters in my head, cracking wise and raising an eyebrow when one of these stories are reported on TV.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, when Scottish cases are reported abroad, everyone goes, "Ooh, maybe some Scotch whiskey was being involved here." Yeah, that's the sort of the classic response. The real game changer was the X-Files. The X-Files had a profound impact on popular media in Britain, in as much as in the sort of 1980s. If you had some kind of ghost or paranormal story, you might get a tiny paragraph with a slight sneer at the end of it. With the vast popularity of the X-Files, journalists and editors throughout the country developed an appetite for telling paranormal stories in their papers. So that's one of the reasons why you suddenly see this huge influx of stories appearing in the press, because there was simply an appetite for it. It didn't mean that they were any better investigated, but it did mean that they got more column inches. That was the big thing. The X-Files factor has kind of slipped away now. I noticed there's less appetite within the press for that, and so we're back to which is the sort of absolute standard response.
But we are, too, also in the reality TV era, where at least there's a little bit more interest in covering the people that go out and investigate these cases. They still might get that stink eye when the stories do air, but at least they're getting some sort of ink and some sort of play on television.
That's right, but generally I think the place to go for serious investigation to find out what was really happening as a thing from the woo is to look at organisations such as the Society for Psychical Research or their Scottish equivalent, and often they'll report their cases anonymously. They'll turn up and they'll say, "Well, we won't give your real names and we won't give the real address, and we'll just try to work out what is actually happening." And then they'll write quite a sort of sober report in their journal or on their website. And those are absolutely fascinating resources. That's the place to go to look for if you're going looking for something that's got some value, I think. Because it's been a very careful investigation. They try to eliminate sort of the obvious mundane sort of sources of, physical activity, physical elements from the normal world, hoax, misperception, that sort of thing. And they tend not to sensationalize it. So once again, I would say those are the organizations where you find real value, as the thing from the let's call up our local tabloid journalist and they will do a woo story.
So the National Enquirer, not a viable news source.
to be treated with a degree of skepticism, perhaps.
Although we could say the same about the Sun, but we just give the Sun a little bit more credit, I think.
Oh, well, you may do, sir, but I could not possibly comment.
I said a little bit more, and that's only for the Page 6 girls. That's probably my favorite part. All right, well, Geoff, we thank you so much for joining us and discussing more with us about the world of poltergeist. Again, the new book is called Poltergeist Over Scotland. It's available from Amazon.com and wherever you can find these books. And Geoff's website is geoffholder.com. It's linked up on the main page of SpookySouthCoast.com as well. You've got over 30 books now written, Geoff, so what's in the works right now?
Well, coming out for Halloween this year, chaps, I have my first book on zombies.
Zombies.
Zombies from history, which is a real hoot. I mean, the zombie apocalypse is coming. You know it, I know it. So, how do you prepare for it? Do you wait for that dull guy from 37 to come through your garden doors to eat your brain, or do you step up and try and take out some of the big guns from history? So the book tells you where to find Henry VIII or William the Conqueror, and how to take them on in a sort of an effective anti-zombie manner.
Excellent. Well, we're looking forward to that and having you back on to talk about that. My two co-hosts here are already planning for the zombie apocalypse. They're fully loaded and ready to go, and they're ready to
We're
start
ready for the biters.
Yeah. Ready.
In the word, double tap.
All right, Geoff. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon.
Much obliged. A pleasure as always. Thank you again.
All right, take care. That is Geoff Holder. And again, check out his website, geoffholder.com, linked up on the front page of SpookySouthCoast.com if you want to check out some of his works. We are just about out of time here. We've got a few minutes left, and I want to let everybody know about what was going on for the past few weeks when we were off the air. And we, of course, had a Legend Trips event last week, so we were unable to come on to the air and actually have a live program, but I did pre-record an interview with Nick Redfern about his new book, Monster Files, which I will be putting up on the website. I've just been super busy, so I haven't had a chance to edit it and put it all together, but we will get it up on the website and out on podcast for everybody. And the discussion that we had with Nick, that I had with Nick, was just incredible about all these government files that mention cryptids. And
like Man Monkey?
Yeah, the Man Monkey.
That story is in there. Of course, some of the werewolf stories that are in there.
Yeah.
Research into sea serpents and into the Loch Ness Monster. And I think there may even be some champ stories in there, Matt Costa. So
nice.
It was a great read. So we will have that up for people to read, to listen to. I'm sorry, coming up in the next few days. And if you are new to the show, every episode that we ever do is podcast. You can get them from iTunes for free, and usually we also have the video component, which we put up on YouTube as well. But we were talking with the engineer, and it was in here, Matt Costa.
Yeah.
It might be making it a lot easier to be putting that spooky TV.
Yeah. It's going to be kind of cool.
I'm kind of excited. I hope it all comes through.
Do you guys have action figures yet for Spooky South Coast?
We're hoping to.
That'd be cool.
We're hoping to.
Anatomically correct?
In that case, the private parts will probably be on top of our heads. But we have been illustrated. Jason Mayo drew that awesome picture of us for our 7th anniversary, and I've now been cartoonized by Dennis Reno. So, and I'm waiting. It's only a matter of time before the Matt Moniz Dennis Reno picture comes out too.
That could be dangerous.
Yeah, well, ufology is one of his main fields that he draws people in, so I'm surprised that he hasn't gotten to you yet, but I'm sure that he will. And then the best part about it is you can order a mug of your caricature from his website, gravestonehotel.com. So I'm thinking that what I got to do is I got to order one of the mugs with my caricature on it and then leave it here at the station, and that'll be the mug that I use when I'm here on Saturday mornings and Saturday nights, and just let it sit there with the cartoon of me and the WBSM logo on it, see what people think. So they'll be like, gee, this guy's only been doing this morning show couple of weeks now, and he's already got his own merchandise line. So t-shirts, hats, sweatshirts, those are all to come.
Bobbleheads.
So we'll be back next Saturday night, and this is going to be a very exciting show next Saturday. I still have to figure out how we're going to pull it off in terms of the logistics of it, because it's going to be great if we can do it right. It's going to be a simulcast with Lara Calhoun and her program Resurrection Radio, and the idea behind it is we're going to be doing her show from 8 to 10, and then our show from 10 to midnight, talking about the need to have paranormal talent agencies, representation within the paranormal field. And if it works out, it's going to be a 4-hour conversation, but it's going to be happening first on her show and then carry over onto our show. So we'll see if we can do it. Maybe she's forgotten about us altogether. That's possible, too. I also like how I just put a brand new battery in my headphones, and now it's dying on me just in time at the end of the show. I'm telling you, we were plagued by poltergeists tonight.
Yeah.
Between the things going on with the computer, and now my headphones are completely dead, and all these different things that have been going on, I think that we've been visited by our own poltergeist tonight. So hopefully it doesn't get any worse, and if it does, we'll be sure to pass the story on to Geoff Holder for his next book, Poltergeists Over WBSM. So that about does it for this week's show. Guys, anything that you want to add on? 30-odd minutes coming up this week?
No, we got 2 weeks off.
Nice. Yep. Little holiday vacation?
Yeah, and searching for more stories.
All right.
That's a big part of it.
All right. Well, hopefully you find them. People can get a hold of you, too, right, if they want to share anything?
Yeah, sure. They can get in touch with us at 30oddminutes.com.
Yeah.
All right, so check that out, and of course, is there a Spare Connections this week, Matt?
There's no spare Connections. They're taking it off for my birthday.
Oh, happy early birthday!
Yeah. And it's our good friend Nick's birthday today.
Yes, happy birthday to Nick. I sent him a message. I couldn't find Ted's Facebook, but I sent one to Nick.
Yeah, Ted's Facebook is deleted, but that's another story altogether.
All right, well, that about does it for this week's show, then. So after some birthday celebrations and some holiday celebrations, we'll be back next week. Until then, for Matt Costa, for Matt Moniz, for Andrew Lake, for Chris Balzano, I'm Tim Weisberg. Stay spooktacular.